So I thought it was high time to do another top, whatever number this ends up being, list of my favorite electronic games, but also at the exact same time of removing both nostalgia and bias. Removing both of those things are important. So if I take a while to speak coherently in this video, keep in mind it's just, me kind of mumbling and stumbling over my words and trying to, separate nostalgia and bias from, actual critical opinion and praise and stuff like that. Speaking of that, where should I start? I want to start with, the obvious, and the obvious is actually right next to me. Let's see, where should I start with this one? I also avoided picking multiple of the exact same series of games. Like, there's not more than one Bopit or more than one Simon, for instance. I feel like that's important. And I thought I'd start with this. Well, it's not it's technically not like an electronic game. It's an LCD game, which kind of falls into that category. It's kind of up for debate. Not like in an argument kind of debate kind of thing. You know what I mean. It's kind of hard to explain is what I'm trying to say. This is Laid Tetris, released in, I believe, 2008. It also has a scoreboard on the back. Yeah, I still never understood why that was actually there. It was made by Raka. I'd imagine association with the Tetris company. Which, that's also, and I will be honest, it's a great excuse to mention how, how Tetris is very widespread and very mainstream nowadays? Sure, it is nowadays, but for those who don't know, Alexei Pajitnov, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that name right, pardon me, I was, and still am, always terrible with names. He invented Tetris, but at the time, I believe that it was back in the 60s, there was kind of like this embargo and or law about not releasing games outside of the Russian Federation. I think specifically video games. You compare that to the fact that Tetris is very mainstream, very popular, and very well known. And I think there's different parts of the Tetris company, like not just the Tetris company, but like there's a competitive Tetris division. There's also Tetris Classic. It's actually kind of hard to remember all of this specific information, so pardon me. Again, the mumbling and stumbling over my words thing kind of gets in the way. But this is actually one of my favorite Tetris iterations. I always say like that, one of my favorites because, it is not very nostalgic with me, but I always loved how streamlined, sleek, and efficiently designed this version of the game Tetris was. In terms of the electronic handheld version of the game, my only real minor nitpick and or complaint, I will admit, it's not like I'm gonna go all ranting, raving about whatever, is the screen is surprisingly small. Not small like, we're not talking like, this small, but it's very, very thin, which is very interesting. But in spite of that, I can still enjoy it, yeah, for some odd reason. I'm a very strange person when it comes to explaining things like that. I like the metallic, purplish, indigo finish that the game has going on here, and I especially love how the word Tetris, the logo for Tetris, rather, it's kind of got the exact same thing going on, but it's not as metallic. Might not show up that well on camera. It's actually more of a solid color. And I also I might get it again at some point, this is called Lighted Tetris, and there was a lighted big screen Tetris game. This one, the lighted version, has a backlight switch. Lighted Tetris, the big screen version, does not, for some unknown reason. I just don't understand that. And I forgot to point this out as well. This is a palette swap and a redesign. The big screen lighted Tetris, pardon me, I've had had a hard time swallowing as of recently. Yeah, that keeps happening. But the original version, it's a lot more, perspective is kind of in the way. It's a lot more bulkier, it's a lot more round as well, and it ran on, I think, either 2 or 3 AA's. This one actually runs on 2 AAA's, right here. And the color palette was inverted. The buttons were still, and they are, rubbery. You can't actually, no one can, feel an image, so I'm just, explaining it. These are rubbery kind of buttons, like that rubbery silicone, feeling, but, the buttons were purple, and I believe either the top was silver and the bottom was white, or vice versa. I haven't had that one in a long time, so that's why it's hard for me to remember. But, yeah, this is probably one of my favorite iterations of the game of Tetris in general. I should probably explain the buttons. Try to get the bit of dirt off the screen. Sound, which you can have it be on either with the music. I think it's just music and there's no sound effects. sound effects, or off altogether. Start, and that's also the pause button, as you can clearly see. I think that's the... What does that button do? It lets you, you can only do one at a time, obviously, but, like, you can switch out pieces, like which one you actually have right there, I think. Let me see. Yes. Rotate buttons. Left, right, down, hard drop down. It's pretty much Tetris. It's, you know, just Tetris. It's easy to explain, you know, who doesn't know what Tetris is, after all. I do really, again, like how sleek and efficiently designed the game is. The swallowing thing. Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite versions of Tetris. I was going to include Tetris 360 in this video instead, but I'm actually holding, this is my brand new iPad right here, and it doesn't have one of those magnetic case things, so I can't prop it up, which is why I couldn't play Tetris 360. I will probably dedicate an entire video to that in the distant future. Not like, you know, years, whatever, but you know what I mean, like, because I have to get a case, it's probably not going to take that long, so who knows. You know what I mean. That's why I try to focus on featuring games that I can at least try to play with one hand, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes more sense, but moving on, we have Tickle Toes. This is actually another excuse, I will admit, another blatant excuse, mainly to actually bring it up for those who haven't heard about this, and also because one of my fellow researchers and one of my best friends of all time, thank you so much, dude, you know who you are, you're watching this video. He doesn't want to be mentioned by name because he doesn't actually use YouTube to make content, because he actually just loves to leave comments, you know, supportive comments, which I really do appreciate. But he actually got one recently. One of my other best friends, it's Stella B, I believe is her username on YouTube and all forms of social media. She got one recently. This is, again, Tickle Toes, released in, was it 2001? Hold on. Always cross-reference that with the manual, by the way. Whatever electronic game you may get. I can't zoom because I'll mess up the video. I really have a hard time seeing text text that's small. Again, pardon me. The manual says 2002. The game claims 2001. So if I had to wager an educated and estimated guess, it was most likely developed in 2001 but released in 2002. Again, I have to cite my sources. I always cite my sources, or at least try to, before making these claims. People should try and do that in general, by the way. But I'm gonna power it on.
Tickle Toes has game times too. Tickle by go, and I'll play with you. I've got Laugh Riot and Runaway Chuckle.
Just gonna do a little bit of Laugh Riot. I'm gonna intentionally lose, though. I'm not doing a full run. I couldn't. Because I need both hands. That makes sense.
Ready?
Having a hard time focusing because of the perspective thing. It's very, I know, it's kind of tedious.
You got 9 tickles. You beat the high score. You're the best of the best. My poor toes need a rest.
It's gonna have a wiggle and giggle and fit. A wiggle and giggle fit, pardon me.
Laugh Riot, Runaway Chuckle.
I always love that, too. I'm not sure if people have ever asked me this before, but no. I actually, despite the fact that I do have very shaky hands, you know, you can see it with my poor camera work and all that, the game actually does shake that excessively. Let me do that again. That's because of how powerful the motor is after it was repaired. And also, I think I've pointed this out before, but I'll mention it again for those who aren't aware. Motor test is 2 and 3. Wait for that noise, then press 1. It does stop after a while, I believe either 38 or 58 seconds. But that was kind of off topic, I will admit. What was I going to say? I really am getting sidetracked, I will admit, and I am sorry for that. I'm sorry for wasting everyone's time. I like this game because of how goofy it is. You can definitely tell by just its appearance alone, and, you know, how, you know, exaggerated it is when it, like, shakes and wiggles and giggles. It's very, very silly. And I actually don't know this for sure. I still want to take an estimated and educated guess that this is supposed to presumably give the illusion of, you know, because I've always explained this as electronic game as if it were if a cartoon character was in the form of an electronic game. Once again, pardon me. I think they're going for like a cartoon character outline there, just like an orange outline, if that makes sense. Again, I don't know entirely. But onto the new information that, you know, my best friend recently fetched. That's the person who voiced Tickle Toes. Marty Moran. No, not Marty Moron. It's spelled M-O-R-A-N. And that friend of mine actually reached out to Marty on, I believe it was Instagram, and he actually got a response. I can't share it because, you know, which is kind of weird. You actually can't share screenshots on YouTube. Like, you can't actually add attachments, which I always found that very strange. Is that just me? But, I almost put the game back I put the game back too soon. I always loved how expressive the game's overall aesthetic is. Like, not just the outline, but, like, the goofy face. It's definitely going for the very Saturday morning cartoon vibe. I can definitely tell. Like, I actually want to know who sculpted and painted this thing. It's very, very silly. It's actually, it's very, very old, so that means that it's also out of print. I don't know exactly how rare it is. I know it's probably in that either rare or very rare camp, depending. Like, we don't have an official archival system for most of this stuff, and I say most of that because the only one off the top of my head that we do have concrete confirmation on is the SDCC 2010 or 2009 Cobalt Edition loops. And this is for actually a few reasons, because it's the only electronic game in history, not even Bopit or Simon claims this, of having an SDCC variant in general. And the other reason is because it was limited to 500 units, which I would show that, but again, it's kind of far away, so I can't zoom in on it from that far. What's next? The 2020 reissue of Simon Classic, and that's important contextually because I think I mentioned this, yeah, I have mentioned this before, but, you know, for those who are new to, like, my channel and this video in general, I will take any excuse I can to reference this. No, mention this, I mean. You're not missing much. The game is slightly smaller than the 2016 version. The power high store volume button, it's not color-coded like the 2016 version. For some unknown reason, the word Simon is this metallic silver color. The back of the game does not feature... It had, like, these special grips on the 2016 version. I have no idea why those were omitted entirely. The 2016 version was also a lot heavier because it ran on double A's, whereas this version runs on triple A's. Pardon me. I believe the programming for both of those versions, you know, this version and the 2016 version, are completely identical, so you're not really missing much. With that aside, let me showcase the game in its entirety, best I can at least. What was my high score? Forget. Oh, 12. That was intentional. Oh, I got 4. If we just turn it off real quick. I like the sound it does when it makes me turn it off, when it turns off, I don't know why. Yeah, that, I don't know why, maybe because it sounds really retro. Kind of like the game's overall sound design itself. And it's not just the sound design that's very retro, it's the overall aesthetics of the game. Like, it's probably not going to show up too well on camera, so let me show you what it actually literally sounds like. That's literally the exact same kind of literal feel of texture that the original Simon game had for its buttons, which is a really, really nice homage. And I can confirm that it was a Klitzner invention, both the 2016 iteration and this version of the game. Again, they're pretty much identical, you're not missing much. So that's definitely a very clear and blatant sign that Klitzner really respected and does still respect Ralph Baer. Yes, I'm actually pointing out. I'm actually pronouncing his last name properly. Most sources tend to pronounce his name as Ralph Baer. It's actually it's pronounced Ralph H. Baer. The H actually stands for Heinrich. I believe he originated from Germany. But yeah, I can definitely tell this was made in as much respect as possible for a man who and we all should, is still fondly remembered to this day, not just for that one credit, no, but for being one of the most positively influential inventors in general, and positively influential people of all time. That's actually the reason why I got literally every single Simon game I could in existence, at least, for that Simon Retrospective playlist thing. Yeah, for those who don't know, that was made entirely out of respect. What should I do next? Neo Jam. Yeah, that's not gonna be fun. That's not gonna be easy to talk about. I can at least talk about the stuff that I literally am legally allowed to talk about, which is, to put it shortly and, you know, as carefully worded as possible, very rushed development cycle. Very, very rushed. The end result is a game that has really bad build quality, like, for some reason. No. A lot of the, parts of the mechanisms do not respond properly. Like, for me, this hasn't been responding too well, and sometimes this does not register in either direction. That still responds reasonably well. That's fine, but that's not the only problem the game has. It's actually the internal sound chip, not the speaker. Most people actually get that wrong. It's the internal sound chip itself that is really bad. And considering that Hasbro, I think they actually still do hold the rights to the property of Neo Jam, and Hasbro is very, very shady with the way they treat their creators, let's just say. Yeah. Make of that what you will. Let's go back to the positive stuff, though. I really do like the somewhat futuristic vibe this game's design gives off, and I think I might have pointed this out in prior videos, but if you look closely, which is why I'm bringing it close to the camera, the game has this very, very gorgeous glittery finish on the green accents, the green highlights, and a metallic and glittery finish on every other highlight. For example, the inside of the strumming feature, literally the entirety of the metallic silverish gray paint job the game has on the exterior. There's also it doubles as a headphone and speaker jack, which is pretty cool, because, you know, it's a guitar after all. It's based on an electric guitar, to be more specific. Fun fact, an electric guitar is also commonly referred to as an axe. I'm going to at least try to play this game, not in its entirety, because, you know, one hand here, so go over what the buttons do first. Power, on, off, volume, selects which music track you're using for when you play the game. Mode, which jam, rhythm jam, group jam, which is essentially its version of Pass It, and free jam, which is literally just freestyle. I forgot to point this out. I don't think I actually ever pointed this out in general. But the actual concept behind Neo Jam is interesting in the way that it was essentially made to give Beat Bop, you know, that mode in Bop-It where you just play the game but with sound effects. It was essentially made and conceptualized to give that game its own mode, which that's the end result, by the way. Yeah, it's really hard to do this with one hand. I can explain at least. You can strum either up or down. There's no incorrect input. Same thing goes with the twist mechanism. The same does not apply for the slide mechanisms. There are actually two lights. One here and one here. Yeah, it's really hard to play. I can't really, literally can't do much about this because, again, playing this, or at least trying to play it with one hand. So, again, I really do like this game quite a lot, except for the way it was treated. And supposedly, I don't have any concrete evidence yet, supposedly, it's pretty much just a rumor at this point, it might be getting re-released, not even remade. Like, the only thing that might change is probably the build quality and the actual internal sound chip. That's probably what will happen if the game gets re-released. Sorry if I didn't talk about that one too much. It's actually hard to talk about Neo Jam. That makes sense. Next up, we have the Color changing purple to blue 20Q 2.0. That is quite the mouthful. When did this one come out? I always have a hard time remembering that. Camera, please. Camera, please. I can't zoom in. Oh, it's focusing. I think it was 2008 or 2009. I can't show it on camera because, well, I can, but doesn't want to focus because reason withheld that I cannot comprehend. This is one of my favorite 2.0s, especially because, look at this in real time, by the way. It's gorgeous. It looks absolutely gorgeous the way it literally turns color with, you know, when it's exposed to heat, like, you know, specifically when you're holding it, it changes color. I love stuff like that, especially because, I'm not sure if people know this, but blue is a very calming and relaxing color, which is why I prefer this over the, what was it? Red to orange to yellow variant, which I think I still do have somewhere. It's very beaten up. It's definitely aged poorly, aesthetically anyway. Which is why, again, I prefer this over the other one, because, you know, it's in better condition, and, you know, blue is a very calming color. I don't want to do an entire run of 20Q, that takes a little bit of time. But I will explain the stuff that needs to be pointed out for people who want to get this one. There are two variants. This is the, again, purple to blue one. Then there's the other one that I mentioned, the red to orange to yellow variant. And this one has an easier to read screen, as opposed to the 1.0. The 1.0 is known for having a screen that's not that easy to read in general. I think that's actually why they included that indent, if you want to call it. You know, so the screen would be from a much, I guess, deeper perspective? I don't know how else to word that, honestly. And there is the inclusion of the undo button. Speaking of the buttons, the button layout is still unknown, no, on yes, new game. Sometimes undo, I think I already said undo, so hopefully I'm not repeating myself. Sound and reset. This is actually one of my favorite sound fonts for 20Q in general, by the way. The Disney one also uses the exact same sound font. I believe the Simpsons one, Harry Potter one, and Star Trek one also use that exact same sound font. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to cross-reference that with someone who actually owns that. Let's see. You have the usual suspects in terms of things you can choose to have, I guess. Hold on. Animal, vegetable, mineral, other, or unknown. And again, I'm not actually going to play the game in general. I will just, like, more or less explain it. Again, aesthetically beautiful. Like, literally, the way it's changing color in my hand is just gorgeous. I love the sound font. I feel like the sound font is more relaxed, I guess? Like, it's not very harsh on the ears, if that makes sense. Again, maybe that's just me. I don't understand what this is for, like, aside from it pretty much being an excuse to omit the backlight switch that were in a few of the... Actually, a majority of the 2.0s, but a few of the 1.0s, specifically the later version of the 20Q 1.0, which is the multicolored one. You know, you can have either blue, orange, purplish blue, or, was it green or red? I forget. And then the 20Q Gold Edition, which came bundled with the Toys R Us exclusive 20Q Challenge. That was the only way you could actually get that in person. Also had a backlight switch right here. Whereas, again, this one does not have a backlight switch entirely. It just has, like, this flat thing, whatever it's supposed to be for. Like, you know, aside from omitting the aforementioned backlight switch. What's left? World's Smallest Bop-It. I talked about this one fairly recently, I believe, either a month ago or a few weeks ago. Pardon me, I'm not very good with the concept of time. For those who actually missed that video, I will always treasure this one. Not like on a nostalgic or bias level, no. But on a very deep, meaningful, and philosophical level. Because, again, for those who missed it, last year was my 25th anniversary of electronic gaming. Last year was the same year I interviewed Dan Klitzner, the inventor of Bopit. And last year, Bopit celebrated its 25th anniversary. It's like it was meant to happen, man. I swear, it was like some kind of crazy coincidence, and I appreciate it as a result. And I have to point this out as well. No, I don't openly go telling people that I interviewed Dan Klitzner because you know, just because he's the inventor of Bopit. That's very preachy, tacky, and virtue signaling. I don't do it because of that. No, if people actually, and not like trying to sound arrogant, but if people are actually interested in watching my interview with Dan, we actually talk extensively on a very deep, meaningful, and philosophical level about interviewing, inventing things in general. Like, it amounts to, will this concept actually become a reality? And if it does, will it take off the mainstream audience? Will it become popular? And not only that, but I respect Dan Klitzner as a person, not just as an inventor. And he knows that. So, world's smallest. Let me go over... Let me try to show this on camera right here. 2021 Hasbro. ST Limited, that's the abbreviation for Super Impulse Limited. It finally shows up on camera. Oh man, that's awesome. The pedestal is... I don't want to drop my camera. It's up there. I almost dropped my iPad. I just got my new iPad. I don't want to have to worry about it dropping. Where should I start with this one? I'm not even going to be around the bush in a very positive way. This thing's freaking adorable. It is literally the most adorable thing ever. My only minor nitpicks are how, I feel like the Bopit button, the actual purple coloration of the Bopit button, isn't as accurate to the original. Again, it's literally just a minor nitpick. Like, I'm not ranting and raving about it. It's just like an observation. On a similar note, the Twisted Object is a little bit too small. And it's got that shiny finish, and... No, I was going to say the pulled stuff are the same fate. No, it actually didn't. It's more or less the exact same in terms of proportion, at least from my perspective. Like, not my... Well, actually, my literal point of view, like, from how far away or close away I can see it, if that makes sense. It's perspective tricks, is what I'm trying to say. It does not have the original programming. It has the programming specifically of the Classic 3.0, and I will get to that at some point in its own video. Hold on. I'm going to sleep. It's so funny. But because it actually has, from what I can assume, a literally physically downscaled chip of the Classic 3.0, which Classic 3.0 is that flat as opposed to bulbous version, somewhat redone version of the Shout. You know what the Shout one is, right? You know, the one that has Bop, Twist, Pull, and Shout It, which is the one, it's got the little switch that, when you flip the switch up, it actually activates the microphone input. But this one, it's actually, pardon me, I gotta make sure that I speak coherently. I have a really hard time with that. It has the programming and features of a classic in the way that it has solo, beat bop, you know, solo, which is, again, you know, Vox Bop solo. Pass It, which is beat bop. Oh. Vox Bop Pass It. Wow, I'm really having a hard time with this. Beat Bop solo and Beat Bop Pass It. The reason why that's a big deal is because, and I will take any excuse I can to bring this up, it's so satisfying to share this with people who are curious. The original Bopit, which this one is indeed fashioned after in terms of aesthetics, but not proportion. When it released in 1996, the original Bopit didn't have that much RAM space, or capacity if you prefer. This is why each sound file is actually, if you break it down, like if you literally deconstruct the game's programming, only 6 seconds long. And that's actually why, if I had to wager a guess, I will try and ask Dan at some point, why that ow placeholder stream thing that you hear in Rystar, however you pronounce that game, and the original Metal Slug game exists, because it's a stock sound effect, so they probably didn't have time or literally space to actually include an original recording file of someone streaming. And that person who did all the voice files, which there were, I think there were only 4, right? Bop It, Twist It, Pull It, Pass It. Yeah, there were only 4 voice files at the time. Those were done by Kid Group, Klitzner Industrial Design Group, Bob Welch, who also apparently voiced Top It. Yeah, that weird sister product thing. Yeah, that's really cool. I always love that when developers or staffers at whatever development team voice or help out a lot with something. It's always really charming when that happens. But, yeah. The other things I have to point out is that Pass It as a feature as a whole, in general, was actually added at the very last minute during the game's completion and or development cycle. And you contrast it with the fact that, for example, all of these, and pretty much every Bop-It in general has a passive feature. And then Beep Bop Solo was highly requested during the original's development, but, you know, as you'd guess, during the original development of the game, as you would imagine, because the game didn't have that much space, it couldn't be implemented. That's actually the logical and scientific reason why, I can get over here, it first debuted in this version of Bop-It. Not just the Flick and Spin It Bopjects and more quips and audio and voice files in general, voiced by the legendary Scott Parkin, by the way, but because the game in general, as a result, has more RAM space. It's always awesome to point that out. But getting back on topic, I always have a hard time, you know, focusing. I really do love this. It is really, really adorable, and it's always a pleasure to find those type of people who at one point played the original Bop-It, but haven't played Bop-It in years, or in some cases, decades. I don't know why, it's just something that's so satisfying about that for some reason. I don't know how to explain it, for some reason. Another thing that I do have to point out, which, you know, probably because of the game's actual physical size...
Loud, quiet, blasting. Loud, quiet, blasting.
It doesn't actually affect the volume level. It says loud, quiet, blasting, but probably because of how small the game actually is, nothing actually changes.
I'm going to sleep.
Let's turn off. So, yeah, it's a really great game. Although, like I said, and I mentioned earlier, I do have my minor nitpicks with it. And last but not least, I felt like it'd be fitting to save it, you know, for last, to avoid sounding biased or... No, I couldn't be nostalgia by and grow up with it, you know what I mean. We have Flip Slide, which I'm not going to be able to play with both hands. Probably not going to play at all. I can still point out, you know, the sound effects and stuff. I'll try at least. Because Flip Slide is... It's one of my favorite electronic games in general of all time. But much like every piece of media ever, it does have its flaws. Thankfully, from my experience, anyway, they are minor. The one that most people tend to pick on the most is distortion in terms of the actual speaker quality. Hold on.
Twist a block to choose a mode. Slide a block to start playing.
It's very hard to notice, even with the volume being on full blast. It's very hard to notice. Like, you'd have to be a crazy fast flip slider. Which, I actually have to point this out. Does anyone remember the Rubik's slide, you know, the thing where you twist and slide up, down, left, right? That thing actually could not handle speed solving, despite the fact being an actual Rubik's product. Literally on, and I always say this because I can't unsay it, I guess? On the Flip Slide, I can never unsay that. Flip Slide actually can handle speed solving, but I feel like that actually affects the speaker, the internal speaker, so... Be an efficient flip slider and, you know, abuse frames and, you know, combination moves, abuse frames as much as possible. Always try and predict the patterns, but you don't want to, like, go crazy, if that makes sense. Because, you know, it's only built so well, you know what I mean? Because, like, it's not, like, indestructible or anything, if that makes sense. I do really like this game quite a lot. It's a really awesome, independent electronic game, by the way. Which, yes, it was actually originally pitched to Hasbro, but for the best, they turned down the pitch. Thank God. Yeah, that is a miracle, considering how bad Hasbro treats their creators, like I mentioned earlier. It was actually picked up by the team over at Moose Games and or Moose Toys, depending on which division you're talking about. They do they actually do have two divisions, if I'm not mistaken. I actually reached out to them a few times. I will try and do that again to ask for more information. Like, for example, although we don't know his name... The inventor of Flip Slide is actually a very close friend of Dan Klitzner. I can definitely tell because of the high quality of the game itself. I can explain the game, the actual gameplay itself. It's pretty self-explanatory. Especially if you get one brand new in the package, it'll literally tell you, what does it say? Twist and slide the blocks to match the color of the lights. I'm not even going to try to do a Flip Slide voice imitation ever again. But it's pretty much just that. And actually... Another fun fact, until you take out the Try-Me tab, which is apparently a very thick Try-Me tab, you can tell by the slot right there, the patterns are always preset, like it's actually the exact same pattern layout every single time. And a very strange fact, it's actually physically screwed to the box. That baffled me the very first time I got my flip slide. And if I can get this to show up on camera, without, it doesn't actually break that easily, but still I gotta be careful regardless. I'm not sure if it's showing up, but there are metal rods, and there are like these metal contact things, whatever, that attach to these metal contacts, which I believe are magnets, which is a really great way of keeping the blocks in place. That's a really great idea. And I've pointed this out before. I'm probably not gonna be able to do this, but yeah, I can't do it efficiently. But hearing the clicking noise of the blocks literally flipping and sliding up, down, all around, it is one of my favorite sounds of all time. Easily one of the most satisfying sounds, at least in my opinion, in general. Like, it's one of my favorite sounds of all time, dude. So, yeah. I'd say these are some pretty solid games. Some of these are harder to get than others. If you're asking which ones are in print, which I should probably go over that for people who are curious. Get these all together first. Hold on. Pardonnez-moi. World's smallest, where'd you go? World's smallest. Flip slide. You're upside down. The 2020 reissue of Simon Classic, those are all in print. You are all out of print. And these are apparently the rarest of the 4 that are hard to find. And that makes a lot more sense once you realize how criminally underrated these two are. Which, that reminds me, no matter which form of media, which piece of media you're talking about, the more underrated something is, the more awful, the less respect it got by the people in charge of the creators and or inventors, if that makes sense. Which, I forgot to point this out, Tickle Toes was immediately, metaphorically, killed the instant it released, from my understanding, which really sucks. But again, Hasbro, so no surprise there. Out of the ones that you can get now, and the ones that will not cost you that much money, it actually literally depends on your preference. If you're asking for an entry point into electronic gaming as a medium, I'd say Bopit. And again, if you want to, World's Smallest, especially if you want to literally see what the original Bopit looked like back in 1996. Simon isn't that complicated, especially because this is the classic version of the game. It's not like, you know, swipe, micro, optics, or air. Flip slide is... it can be kind of scary for newcomers, like newcomers who are like new to being flip sliders, or especially newcomers to electronic gaming as a medium. How do I explain this accurately anyway? Flip slide is like a fine wine, whereas Bopit and Simon are essentially water. Sure, fine wine is something that you can definitely appreciate, but not a lot of people can access it, if that makes sense, whereas everyone drinks water, and everyone could realistically play either Bopit or Simon, if that's a good analogy, if that makes sense. So yeah, I thought I'd make this video. Hopefully you guys found it entertaining, and especially informative, because that's always one of my 2 main goals. The first one is to be as informative as possible. My second priority is to be entertaining. So with that said and done, thank you so much. This is Sir Bop-A-Lot signing out.